What if the oldest skyscraper on Earth isn't buried under sand, but under time itself? Not hidden in a jungle, not guarded by a curse, just erased so completely that you walk over it every day and never know. Could there have been a technological civilization before history began, and could you be living on its recycled ruins? Start with a simple, uncomfortable fact. Human history is short on paper. Writing shows up around 5,000 years ago. Before that, you have scattered bones, tools, campfires, and guesses. And the further back you go, the thinner the record gets. It's not a movie archive. It's a few frames of a film that burned. Now add another fact. Nature is a ruthless editor. Wind and water grind down mountains. Rivers move like conveyor belts carrying cities away grain by grain. Coastlines shift. Forests eat stone. And the ocean, which covers most of the planet, is constantly burying and unburying its own floor. If you built something durable on the wrong coastline 10,000 years ago, it might now be underwater, covered in meters of sediment or smashed by waves for millennia. Then there's ice. During the last ice age, massive sheets of ice covered huge parts of North America and Eurasia. When ice moves, it doesn't just sit there. It scrapes. It drags rocks like sandpaper. It pulverizes landscapes. If anything complicated existed in those zones before the ice would have been a reset button. And then you learn something that feels like a clue. Sea levels were much lower during the last glacial period. By the time humans were painting caves in Europe, you could have walked to places that are islands today. There was land where there is now sea. Lots of it. If early people gathered in coastal hubs where food is abundant and travel is easy, many of those places are now drowned. It's not that the evidence is hidden in a vault. It's that the vault is the ocean. You keep going because the thought is addictive. Humans have existed for at least hundreds of thousands of years. Homo sapiens alone are around 300,000 years old. And for most of that time, your species wasn't primitive in the way a cartoon suggests. People made complex tools. They planned hunts. They crossed open water to reach Australia at least tens of thousands of years ago. That requires boats, navigation, cooperation, and courage. Not a spark plug, but not nothing. Then you hit the weird part. There are ancient structures that look older than the story you were taught. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey is over 11,000 years old, built by people who, according to the old narrative, should have been simple nomads. Yet it has massive carved pillars, organized layouts, and symbolic art. It's not proof of a lost industrial age, but it is proof that human capability can show up earlier than expected. It whispers. The timeline might not be as clean as you think. You notice more whispers. There are gigantic stoneworks, megaliths across the world. Some are precisely fitted. Some were moved from far away. You can explain them with human labor, ropes, ramps, and time. Most archaeologists do. But your mind can't help asking the forbidden question. If people could coordinate projects like this, what else could they coordinate if conditions were right? Now the hypothesis begins to form like fog turning into a shape. Maybe there was a civilization before history. Not aliens. Not magic, just humans. Maybe they reached a level of technology beyond stone tools, something like early industry, and then collapsed. Maybe climate shocks, pandemics, wars, or even slow decline erased them. And then the survivors started over. And later, we called that restart the beginning. The more you investigate, the stranger it gets. Because the Earth is not a museum with permanent exhibits. It's a recycling machine. Plate tectonics constantly destroys old crust and makes new crust. The ocean floor is especially young in geological terms, renewed over and over. If you built coastal cities 60,000 years ago, you didn't just risk floods. You risked having the floor beneath you subducted into the mantle like trash on a conveyor belt. Even on land, the clock is brutal. Over tens of thousands of years, concrete crumbles. Steel rusts into dust. Wood vanishes. Plastic can persist, but it breaks down into microfragments and scatters. Roads disappear under soil. Within a few millennia, a city can become a low hill. After 10 or 20 millennia, without maintenance, it can become a rumor written in pollen layers. And it isn't only the physical structures. There's a deeper mystery. If a civilization did exist, what would be its fingerprints? You might imagine obvious things like skyscrapers and highways, but real technological societies leave more subtle marks too. Odd spikes of certain metals, strange ratios of isotopes, persistent pollutants, sudden changes in erosion and sediment from agriculture. signs that the planet was briefly, intensely reorganized by minds. That's when you stumble onto an idea with a name that feels like it came from a secret file, the Silurian hypothesis. It's not claiming ancient humans built smartphones. It's a thought experiment proposed by scientists, Gavin Schmidt and Adam Frank, asking whether a prior industrial civilization could be detectable in the geological record at all. The point is unsettling. Maybe the question is, did it happen? But would we even know? Because the geological record is messy, layers get mixed, chemicals move through rock and water, time smears signals. Even your own civilization might become hard to detect after millions of years, especially if it doesn't last long. If you can't easily spot an industrial society after deep time, then the absence of evidence becomes less comforting. You look for more. You find debates about abrupt climate shifts at the end of the last ice age. You hear about the Younger Dryas, a sudden return to colder conditions roughly 12,900 years ago, then warming again. The cause is still discussed. Some ideas involve changes in ocean circulation from meltwater. Others are more speculative. None require a lost civilization. But if you're searching for a reset event, something that could wipe out coastal cultures and scatter survivors inland, this kind of climate whiplash feels relevant. You think about population and memory. A catastrophe doesn't need to erase everyone. It just needs to erase the systems that preserve knowledge. Writing, institutions, stable food supply. If the survivors are few, hungry, and scattered, they may keep stories but lose engineering. Myths become metaphors. Places become lands of the gods. Tools become sacred objects. And after enough generations, even the idea that we used to know more becomes just another legend. You start to feel the pull of it. A prehistorical technological civilization sounds impossible until you stack these facts and imagine how much could be missing. Then the investigation hits a wall. Because there's a reason most experts don't buy the strong version of this hypothesis. A true technological civilization, especially an industrial one, doesn't just leave buildings. It leaves a planetary signature. Mining on a large scale reshapes landscapes and creates enormous spoil piles. Smelting and manufacturing distribute metals widely. Fossil fuel burning leaves soot, distinctive carbon isotope changes, and chemical traces. Nuclear technology would leave long-lived isotopes. Intensive agriculture leaves pollen shifts and soil changes across regions. Even if cities vanish, these fingerprints should linger. And when scientists look, they don't see clear evidence of that kind of prehuman or prehistorical industry. They see the signatures of geology and biology. They see glacial cycles. They see volcanic events. They see gradual changes and natural disasters. They see humans spreading, hunting, farming, building, starting small and accelerating, with the clearest industrial marker showing up in the last few centuries. Archaeology has its own hard constraints too. The deeper you go, the more you find stone tools and bones in patterns that fit human evolution. You find gradual improvements, not sudden jumps to advanced metallurgy or engines. You find trade networks, art, ritual, and complex societies, yes, but nothing that demands factories. Göbekli Tepe, impressive as it is, can be explained by organized hunter-gatherers with time, social structure, and motivation. Megaliths can be moved with clever methods and immense labor. The impossible often becomes difficult but doable once you stop underestimating human ingenuity. And there's an even simpler explanation for why the record feels empty. For almost all of human existence, there were not enough people. A small, dispersed population can be brilliant, but it can't easily build a globe-spanning industrial base. Industry feeds on density. It needs specialists, surplus food, stable cities, and long supply chains. Those conditions are rare until agriculture becomes widespread. And agriculture itself leaves traces, domesticated plant remains, animal bones, landscape change, that archaeologists do find in expected time ranges. So the narrative shifts. Maybe the question is, was there an Atlantis with airplanes? Maybe it's something quieter. Because the mainstream explanation has its own discomforts, it still leaves gaps. It still admits that huge parts of early human life happened on coastlines now underwater. It still admits that we've excavated only a tiny fraction of what exists. It still admits that new discoveries can rearrange the story fast. 30 years ago, Göbekli Tepe wasn't part of the conversation. Now it forces textbooks to speak more carefully. And the no traces argument has limits too. Detectability depends on scale, duration, and materials. A short-lived, regionally advanced culture, skilled in navigation, architecture, maybe even simple machines, could leave a thin footprint that looks like noise after 10,000 years, especially if it was concentrated on drowned coasts. That wouldn't be an industrial civilization as we imagine it, but it could still feel technological compared to the stereotype we project onto prehistory. So you end up in a strange gray zone. On one side, extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence. Right now, there's no solid evidence of a forgotten industrial civilization before recorded history, and the geological record doesn't show an obvious earlier Anthropocene-like spike. On the other side, the human story is older than your written memory, and the planet is very good at erasing things. The absence of evidence is not a perfect proof of absence, especially when the best places to look, ancient coastlines, are hidden under water and sediment. And maybe that's the most important twist. The idea of a lost civilization isn't just about ruins, it's about your relationship with time. You live in a moment that feels permanent because it's yours. But from far enough away, your world could become a thin layer in rock, a faint chemical smudge, a strange fossil of plastic, a mystery that future minds argue about. So the question becomes personal. If you could erase almost everything about a society in a few thousand years, what does that say about yours? And if the past can be more complicated than the official timeline, what else are you assuming is stable just because it's written down? Maybe there was a forgotten technological civilization. Maybe there was, but the deeper you look into prehistory, the more you realize history is not a line. It's a coastline, shifting, flooding, and retreating, while you stand on the shore, trying to remember what the ocean has already taken.